Welcome to the panel. I am Ralph Lewis, and tonight with my co-hosts and analysts, Roy Bodden and Mario Banks, we will be recapping the last few conversations with our special guests. Good night, gentlemen, and welcome back to the panel.
Good evening.
Yes, good evening. Great to be here.
Before we start, I wish to welcome back especially Mr. Mario, who's been on our way on vacation with his wife in Israel. Mario, tell us about your trip and how do the protocols compare to those in the Cayman Islands?
Yeah, thank you, Ralph, and good to be back. Good to be back in the panel. Good to be joined also by my colleague and friend, the Honorable J. Roy Bodden. Want to send a special greeting to all of the viewers of the panel who are watching live and those who watch the replay. But yeah, our trip to Israel, to the Holy Land, was really very exciting. We were very fortunate to have done so. It was one of the bucket list jurisdictions or destinations that my wife and I had on our agenda for many years. And it just happened that the Miss Cayman universe needed a chaperone, and Lavinia, being a former Miss Cayman and also on the committee, was asked to be the chaperone. And going to Israel, I wanted to provide some additional support for her, so I became her chaperone on this trip. And basically, though, it was traveling anywhere now, but especially to Israel, was really very much of a detailed operation. Not traveling is not for the faint of heart at all, but going there certainly took on a whole different dimension. Lavinia is very well organized and very detailed as a planner, and she was assisted by the efficient ladies of the Miss Universe Committee and also the Ministry of Tourism to pull it all together. And it really was a mammoth task, because first of all, you have to get into Israel, you have to be fully vaccinated, or if you had COVID, you have to be certified to have recovered from COVID. And you also had to have a booster. You had to have 3 shots if you're eligible for it. And if you had your first 2 shots more than 6 months prior, you had to have a booster in order to be able to get permission to go in. And then they require a very detailed set of questionnaires, which my wife Lavinia and the team did a lot of work on. And you have to do all of that to get in the system. Once you get into the system, then you have to do another application. I think it's within 72 hours of departure, to get your permission to land or permission to board. And you have to file your vaccination certificate, the official one that we get from HSA, and your PCR test results, all online, all within the prescribed time, and all, of course, showing the documents with the QR codes and everything. And once you get that, they reply to you fairly quickly on email. Once you get that, then you can then travel. But if you get to the last port that your airport that you're going to before you fly to Israel, you also have to again verify all the documentation and at the checkpoint there. And if you are even an hour that your paperwork has expired, or even if it's less than an hour, you have to do it all over again. So they don't joke around at all. And in the airport nowadays, a lot of these places, and particularly Israel, had it where at the checkpoints they have a very user-friendly system where they have the QR code that you can attach yourself to it or upload that to your smartphone, providing you have Wi-Fi in the airport, and do your documentation there, which we had to do. Well, once you're on board, of course, they're very strict with masks, wearing your masks and all the other protocols once you're on the aircraft. And we went from Miami to Frankfurt, and then from Frankfurt to Tel Aviv. And it's like, say, myself and my wife Lavinia, who was a chaperone, and we were chaperoning Miss Georgina Kerford, who is Miss Cayman Universe. Getting into Tel Aviv, the immigration was very straightforward, customs quite efficient. There are some issues with communication and language, challenges. But once you get through that, then you get a green pass, which you get from the immigration officer. What you have to do also going into Israel is that you have to make a reservation and pay for the PCR test before you get there. And they have something at the airport called Test to Go. And you go in after you get your luggage and everything, you go into a separate huge hall, and then they have about 50 PCR testing booths there, and you get your PCR test. And what they do is they do in your throat and in your nose, and it's really quite a detailed operation. But then once you've done your test, and of course it's logged because you made your reservation before, and they have you in the system. They give you a wristband, and you can't leave the airport unless you have that wristband. And then you're required to isolate at a hotel or whatever for 24 hours, or until you get the results of your PCR tests. So, which is really not the most secure, because in our case, we didn't know whether we were negative or positive. I mean, we had done a test before we left here, and we assumed that we were negative, but we were able to leave the airport to get our transportation, drive from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, in the lobby to other people in the hotel, check into the hotel, go to a room and come down to the restaurant. So we could really spread it if we were positive. But anyway, but they have a lot of strict mask wearing protocols which are enforced. Sanitizing stations, you find those everywhere in hotels, restaurants, stores. Some businesses have signs that enforce the green pass. The green pass, you're required to take that with you wherever you go in your passport or whatever, because you could be asked to present it at restaurants or public places. And the other thing that we found also is that most cities and towns in Israel have PCR testing location that you can make an appointment, or you can just show up, but you can also go online, make an appointment to go to get a test. These are not cheap. I mean, some of these things cost $100 and more, and so during our trip, we probably got tested because we carried some lateral flow kits as well. So we probably got tested about 6 or 7 times in the 3 weeks, plus traveling in and out. But as soon as the Omicron variant emerged, and we were there, we got there on the 25th or 26th, I think, and on the 28th, Israel closed the airport because the Omicron had emerged and had 1 case. So we were locked in, but we were free to move throughout the country. But tourists were not coming in, so we had a country for ourselves, really, in terms of visiting the holy sites, and also the Miss Cayman at that time. Once she was transferred from Lavinia's chaperone care, then she went to join the Miss Universe other ladies. But what I found about traveling to Israel in terms of the protocols is that even though they had very high vaccination rates, including the booster, they still had a lot of enforcement. And but closing the airport, especially so close to Christmas, was a hard blow for businesses and for tour operators and taxis and whatnot, because they were really depending on it. They had really only opened in early November to start with, and then it closed down again at the end of November. So it was really traumatic for a lot of people, and we felt bad for them because we know that they were hurting, yes. And so as a result, we were, like I said, we were able to see the country. We were able to crisscross the country while we were there for that 3 weeks period, and from the Jaffa and Tel Aviv in the southwest to Mount Carmel in the northwest to Golan Heights in the northeast, and back down to the Dead Sea and Eilat in the south. So we were able to see a lot, do a lot, and no long lines because the large numbers of tourists were not there. And so it was amazing. And I could tell you some more about some of the things later on if we have time. But the protocols really, as you asked me about, were quite intense and not for the faint-hearted. And you got to have a lot of patience, which I don't have sometimes. My wife has a lot, and she can go through these things. But we were able to get through everything. Thank God, safe. We didn't miss any flights. We didn't miss anything. All the paperwork was in order, very very efficiently disposed of. But if you're not organized, nowadays traveling can be extremely stressful and almost traumatic.
Okay. So that's some words of wisdom. You need to be organized and have a couple extra dollars to pay for those tests.
Yeah.
Roy, any questions for Mario? Turn on your mic, please. Turn on your mic.
No, I don't have any questions, but I have a couple of comments. I see where Israel is always on the cutting edge of these advances in science when it comes to things like these pandemics and other diseases as well. So I see now where they're having they're giving a second booster, a fourth vaccine in Israel. They pioneered that, and they were quick to tell the world that they're leading. They're at the most advanced stage in this because they're the first country so far, I think, which has given this booster, the fourth vaccine, and the second booster vaccine. So they're very serious about containing this virus. They're also by nature very disciplined people because I don't know, I haven't been there like Mario, but I know from what I read in the news, they operate like a state at war. So you have to be disciplined, and they brook no dissension. You can't step out of line.
No.
Because it's a country where their soldiers are on the street. And anyone who knows anything about traveling in these societies, soldiers are not like policemen. Soldiers are trained for one thing, and they don't mess around. So you have to be disciplined, and which is one of the things that is needed if we are to successfully control this pandemic. Needs to be disciplined. We don't need to. These jurisdictions tolerate no dissent. When they lay down the protocols, that's it. You abide by the protocols, or you wind up in the jail.
Yes.
So
yes.
there are things that we can learn from them.
Yes, I mean, some of the people that you speak to, the taxis and others in the stores, they say that, they're so highly vaccinated, and then they were questioning, well, why do we have to close the country down? But like you said, the country is very disciplined, and they didn't take any chances, and they want to understand more about Omicron before they proceeded, and that they took a very cautious approach, very sensible approach. But you're right about the military. I mean, they're top notch, and I've never seen so many people going to work and coming from work. So many people being the military people, and they're all carrying their guns. I mean, heavy guns that they're carrying with them back and forth. Catching the bus or whatever they're doing, and they're well ready for any kind of ambush, I guess. And
well, many people don't realize it, but every young man and young woman in Israel, I think when they graduate from high school, they have to do 2 years compulsorily in the ministry, in the military. 2 years, women and men.
Yes, that's right.
And they're trained for that. And now there was a big couple years ago, there was a big upheaval because the ultra-Orthodox Jews have to do it now also.
Yes.
They were trying to get out of it, but the law was passed where they also have to enter the service too. So we can learn a lot of things from them. Speaking about that, what is the employment situation like? I know that they're a country heavily dependent on tourism, much like Cayman is, so that they're suffering a loss now, as you have said. I followed that on the news too, because there are hardly any tourists now.
Right. Well, because of that, they have some unemployment. But before the pandemic, they were very, very low unemployment rates, and they have to pretty high taxation too. People complain about tax, but one thing they say, when you speak to the man on the street, they say, well, we pay high taxes, but we see where the money is going. Because if you look at their infrastructure, their roads, their bridges, their bus stops, everything is just top notch. Of course, they have quite a bit of US aid coming in there too, which helps with their infrastructure. But people have the view that that their tax money is going, is being invested properly. And people they're quite industrious, and like I said, there's some unemployment now, or some people that are working part-time as opposed to full-time. We did notice that some job sharing going on, where you may have somebody working 2 or 3 days a week, and then another person comes on 2 or 3 days a week. So they have some job sharing because of the situation with the economy,
Right.
since the pandemic. But what I also found, Dr. Roy, that I know you would relate to as well, is the fact that agriculture over there is amazing. I mean, especially in the north, because Jerusalem is kind of in the middle of the country, and then going south from Jerusalem towards Eilat, you're getting to the Jordanian desert, and the Negev desert is very dry. I mean, they do have some farming there with date palms and dates and olives, but not going north from Jerusalem going up is a much different kind of environment. It's green and get more rain and stuff. And you can look some places, you can look for miles and miles, and you see green, and you see the bananas, and you see the all other kind of vegetables and fruits and stuff, and oranges, and they have signs on a lot of their farms, and they say grow more with less, and so they rely heavily on technology, and
That's right.
and they have a system there that I'm sure that you're familiar with, and others. It's called the kibbutz. The kibbutz.
Yes, the villages, the little
yeah,
self-sufficient villages. Yeah.
right. It's like a little
Everyone's
cooperative,
food and all
right? So people actually, what they do is people actually work for those cooperatives or those villages, and they also get to live there free, and they get their food and everything, and they get a small salary, a small stipend. But these things are so efficient. They're like still kind of like farmers co-ops, or they may own the land, or the government may give them or lease them the land, or peppercorn, and these people farm these things, and they're so productive and so fertile, and it's just fantastic. I was really, really impressed with the agriculture, and also they got aquaculture as well, the fish farming, and then they got the other livestock as well. So and Israel is also high tech, a lot of high tech work that they do, and also diamonds, quite a bit of diamonds in the north, and so they do diamond mining and stuff. But like I say, I heard about the agriculture, but I did not appreciate the extent of it. And I thought Israel was smaller, but you can look some places you can't see, further than your eye can see, and there's just green and farms and whatnot.
They export a lot of their expertise to so-called developing world too. A lot of the African countries, that because it was the Israelis who were really pioneers and experts at what we call hydroponic farming.
Right.
Because like you said, a lot of the place is desert, so they use water and chemicals, and they're experts. Another thing they're good at is cattle farming.
Yeah.
Cattle, sheep, goats.
Yes.
Ruminants, they're experts at that. So, one of the things I often question here is, why don't we turn to them? I know some years ago there was discussion. They were in some jurisdiction because they're experts at really turning arid terrain into something which is productive agriculturally. So they could give us they would be of a lot of assistance to us, because Israel itself is a small country, but they're more than self-sufficient. They produce a type of oranges they call Jaffa. Jaffa oranges, I believe it comes from a place in Israel called Jaffa.
Correct.
very, 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 very succulent fruit, you
Yes.
know.
Yes.
And they grow things like dates, things that can grow here, dates, bananas,
Mhm.
and all that kind of
Yes.
stuff. But I don't know.
I do believe that as we
Maybe,
go
maybe,
forward.
maybe the more people listen to the panel, the more people will become
Yes.
cognizant about these kind of things and turn to
Yes.
someplace else beside the
Yes.
traditional jurisdictions that we look to now.
Yes,
Yes.
I think that as we move forward out of this pandemic, we're going to have to sort of look at things differently. Food security is something that we need to focus on going forward. We have to, it can happen. We just need to get the, get the mindset to do it. And it's been done before. So like I said, we can learn from Israel a number of things that we can
Yeah,
adopt here.
and Mario hit on a point. What I like about them is that they rely on technology. They
Mhm.
rely on science and technology,
Mhm.
because it's still a small country, and
Yeah.
so they don't have an overpopulation that they can be labor intensive. So they use a lot of technology, and they're very proficient and they're very expert at developing technologies to assist them so that they don't have to depend so much on manual labor, which is the way we should go here. I don't know, Mario, if you had an opportunity, but they have an excellent school system too. They have
They
an
do.
excellent school system, and particularly when it comes to things like the trades,
Yes. Yes.
and vocational stuff. Excellent, excellent.
I wanted to do some more work around, some more, visiting of the farms and also the educational stuff, but I just didn't have the opportunity. But then I spoke to somebody from the Hebrew University right there in Jerusalem, and they said
Yeah.
that, and they have a couple of other ones in Mormon University as well. But the Hebrew one, they say once you go through that, before you finish, you got a job waiting for you because it's such a good program, and
Right.
and you're in demand. But their education system is very, the people are very literate and they're very bright, and that's why in terms of farming and agriculture, that's why I admire what you're doing, Dr. Roy, with your livestock and stuff up
Yes.
there in Bodden Town. And like we said, Ralph, is Cayman needs to become a bit more self-sufficient as much as we can. I mean, we can't do it 100%, but we need to work towards being more self-sufficient, having some more food security, because if you look at the situation with the supply chain issues and everything else, if we don't do that, we're gonna end up having a serious problem. And the Midlands, where you guys are, that's where you got a lot of fertile land, but a lot of it is being used and rezoned or redeveloped for residential purposes, and a lot of the good farmland is just disappearing. So that's a matter for concern the government needs to look at.
And
That
if you
is
look
my
at,
beef.
and,
That is my lament. That is my constant lament. And everywhere you go now, you're building the population. So, oh, by the way, before someone called me to say that Cayman News Service had an article about some big development that's going on in Crystal Harbor. That is some kind of semi-mysterious, a hotel, all these high-rise apartments and all that. Did you guys hear about that?
Crystal Harbor, I haven't heard about that one.
I didn't, but I wouldn't be surprised.
The informant told me it was just on Cayman News Service shortly before we came on.
Okay.
And it seems to be a lot of mystery surrounding it. Nobody knows who's the developer, but it has already captured the attention of people, because it sounds like, from the description I got, it's another mammoth development.
Really?
Maybe the applications have gone into planning, so maybe I could check that to see if there's an application in there where this is coming from. And that's probably where it starts from. There's a number of things that are going to be happening on that on the island, as we can tell. There's one for a 10-story hotel in the middle of Georgetown that's supposed to happen very soon. And they are developing. So I think there's probably a planning application which we can check and see if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the whole issue of carrying capacity and having a long-term plan.
Well, it's like I asked Mr. Langevin, for whom are we building these things for? For whom are we building these things for? Who are we developing? And if we now, is a good opportunity to segue into what has been topical over the past 4 weeks. Imagine if at this stage we cannot find sufficient numbers of Caymanian people to staff the establishments we have now. Why are we building more? So the answer I was given was that, oh, well, you know how much money the government makes off this stuff? Well, off the sale of work permits, perhaps. But is that in the long run, is that really worth the cost we have to pay in terms of the environment? In terms of, we don't get any infrastructural fees, we give concessions. So the money that the government is making off license fees or whatever the case might be, it comes in one hand, it goes out in the next, and probably more go out than come in anyway. So when are we going to have a reckoning and say the path we're on really doesn't add up? We have to think about doing something else or doing what we're doing now differently.
Agreed.
Yes,
Could I just say, just to go back to the Israel thing for a minute, gentlemen, is that Miss Cayman Universe, Georgina Kerford, was really a good ambassador for the Cayman Islands. She performed well, and the event Miss Universe was held at the port, because there's no big auditoriums in Israel, so they had to actually bring in a huge tent from Portugal and assemble it at the port. And when you look at that, you thought it was in a great Albert Hall or something, but
that's correct.
It's actually a huge tent, and very secure, because the Israelis didn't take any chance with having it something like that. So you had to actually go to a certain area to get in the bus to get to this location. Even taxis couldn't get down there because of security. But like I said, if people want to see more about my trip to Israel and Holy Land, you can go on my Facebook page, Mario Ebanks, and you see a lot of photos and stuff that I try to share. One of the things I found, people think that Cayman is expensive, but I say try Israel, because it's expensive. And Tel Aviv is voted this year as the world's most expensive city. So Cayman is expensive, yes, but there's places that are much more expensive in Cayman. We got to be careful with our pricing, of course. But But anyway, gentlemen, it was a great trip, and I'm happy that we went and we saw so much. And like I said, when we talk a little bit about the Christmas stuff, I may mention a little bit about the holy sites, but I was happy that we were able to go through and get back safe. And I heard about your shows while I was away, and some great guests, and I heard that the shows went very well. So I wasn't able to watch the replays, but I understand it was well done. So thanks very much for everything.
Well, you were definitely missed, and we had, while you were gone, we had 4 great guests that came on, and they really spoke from their heart. And we had some, very interesting discussion. The last one last week was very heated at times, but we got some information out, and I learned a lot from that one, where we had the head of CETA, Mr. Mark Langevin. He was here, and before that we had the minister, Minister Bryant, and before that we had Mr. Michael Miles, a young man who is trying very hard to fill a gap. And just after you left, we had the deputy governor, Mr. Franz Madison. He did, he explained what the protocols were that we had in place. And so we had some very, very interesting discussions over the last 4 weeks. And I think we sort of have an idea now of what the panel is all about and how important our role is as we go forward into the new year. But I would like to start off with what happened last week and probably go back from that, because we don't want to lose focus on the importance of employment. And we've been pushing to ensure that everyone in the Cayman Islands, particularly the young people, those unemployed, have a chance at gaining employment. And this is opportunity, like Mr. Budden said, we may have lost an opportunity when we shut down. But as we move forward, what can we do to ensure that our people do get a rightful place? And so that's where we let the conversation to go. Next couple of minutes, if you want to jump in there, Roy, just to give us a update on what happened last week with the conversation you had with Mr. Longifon?
Yeah, well, there were several highlights, several things that interested me that I brought to the fore with the director of the Cayman Islands Tourism Association. One is that I saw in one of the interviews, right, that they were very short of cooks, that they made a statement that they need to bring in something like 300 cooks to service the hospitality industry. So one of the questions I asked was, what happened in the interregnum when we were locked down? Was there any kind of training? Because I'm concerned that what is going to happen is what happened in the past, where Caymanians only get the lower level employment opportunities, and all of the mid and upper level opportunities, they're going to scream that they have to bring in work permits for. So I'm concerned, I was concerned about that, and I brought that to his attention. I'm cognizant of, I cannot understand for the life of me why we don't work on a scientific basis. What I did understand from him, though, Mario, is that they're operating in silos, that there is not much serious discussion between, for example, the Tourism Association, the Department of Tourism, and even work.
Yeah.
Each is operating in its own silo, and they only come together in the most crucial and under crisis management.
Mm-hmm.
But normally, that should be the normal state of operations. That should be the normal course of operations, where the three of these come together. So perhaps they might need someone like you with your expertise, Mario, to help organize them. Organize them and bring them together, because unless that and until that happens, we are always going to be at cross purposes and at loggerheads, and then we're going to be doing crisis management. Now, the Tourism Association say, we need these people and we need them now. We need these work permits and we need them now. And the government is saying, we are not so anxious to grant these work permits because you have to convince us that you try to employ Caymanians.
Yeah. Well, I have been like you and Dr. Roy. I've been crying in the wilderness for decades also about that same subject. And unless we actually grab this bull by the horns and make a long-term plan, totally coordinate these things and join these things up, and all the different institutions are talking to each other, and we have a holistic strategy. We're just putting on band-aids over a very large wound, and it's going to come back to haunt us. It's come back to haunt us now. And so I don't know why is it that the governments find it so difficult to do. I mean, I have, and your symposium that you held, that we held for you in earlier this year at the Harquail, the Roy Borden Symposium. I did a paper there about the same thing, about the need for a human capital development strategy that pulls all the players together. And the hospitality is an area that a lot of Caymanians traditionally were involved in, but not so much now. We got to determine why that is, and why is it that the turnover rate is so high for Caymanians, and why is it that we're not having a much more robust approach to recruitment and retention and development of Caymanians in that very important sector. I mean, like I say, in Israel, I found that of course there's a diverse population, but you have their people at the front lines. You may have others in the back, but the front lines, and we have our people nowhere hardly anywhere in the hospitality industry. So we got to address. So I'm glad that you were able to probe that matter with Mr. Langevin. And I think he has his heart in the right place, but we need to get people aligned, and you got to get government policy as well to pull it all together and get these guys who come in like him focused and moving in the right direction, and not letting off these smoke screens.
Well, we can keep those questions handy, because I've arranged with Mr. Howell, the chief officer of that ministry in charge of work as well, to come on very early in the new year. And he has agreed he is going to come on probably the first show that we have in January to sort of explain or have a discussion on where the government is with what they're doing. And so at that point, we'll be able to have this kind of some further discussion on this topic. But I believe we definitely need to get a hand on it. And, we can't just push it under the rug. And we can't go back to the way we were before. Like Roy said many times, in a year or two, we're back to where we were 2 years ago. That's not acceptable. And so we have to do something now. Otherwise, that's where we're going to end up.
Did you get a sense, gentlemen, from Mr. Langevin, why is it that young Caymanians are not actually migrating towards the hospitality industry? Is there a particular reason, or is it a whole bunch of reasons?
I'll let Roy answer that question, but in one word, myths. He said there are many myths that exist, and so therefore it's discouraging Caymanians from going into that industry.
I can't understand. I can't determine whether he was serious or not. But he says it's because of people like me. People like me. My argument's discouraging them, but I know the story from the inside, and one of the things that frustrates me, gentlemen, and he admitted himself, look, I was the chairman of the committee who put together the curriculum for the hospitality training school. And the hospitality training school was at UCCI. It operated from UCCI, although it was not per se a part of UCCI. It used our facilities, and we had an arrangement with the Ministry of Tourism. It was a commercial arrangement. But I know a little about the hospitality school because in my walks of the campus, I talked with many of the students. And as was the case with the University College students when I was there, I knew them on a first name basis, right? And they were, at the beginning, they were all gung-ho. But when it came to the work experience time and time for them to be, how should I put it? Right, to be assigned experience in these establishments, they've begun to experience frustration and obstacles, which leads me to believe that the intentions toward hiring Caymanians are not as pure as some people would lead us to believe they are. Because the young people told me of experiences they had. And now the argument comes up, well, that program can only produce only a limited amount of persons. That is true. But the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step.
Right.
Said a famous Chinese philosopher. So what has happened now? You don't hear much about the hospitality training school at all. You don't hear much about it at all. Now, I would suspect that the interest of the government is waning because it was the government who started up in the first place. And by the same token, since the government's interest waned, the tourism establishment interest has also waned because we have come upon this crutch called work permits that they don't want to let up on. So the failures, Ralph, is multiple and can be shared among all of the players. That is why I told him it won't get any better till all of the interested parties sit at a table and iron out and draw up a roadmap of where they should go. And I would suspect, so I was serious when I said this, Mario, I would suspect the reason that it cannot be done by themselves is because they have too many agendas, which are at cross purposes. So what is going to have to happen? You're going to have to bring in an honest broker who comes and said, here is what I think should be the strategic plan for all of us. We drop a strategic plan based on the Tourism Association, based on what the politicians want in terms of employment for Caymanians, and based on work. And until we do that, we're always going to be wrangling, and there will always be guests on the panel, and we'll be talking the same things, and I'll be asking the same questions, and Mario, you'll be asking the same questions, and Mr. Lewis, you'll be trying to arrange them, and it won't be to no avail.
Well, I'm hearing employment czar. That's what I'm hearing, employment czar, because my question was, who's going to arrange it? We have silos, so who's going to put it together? We can't expect each of those silos to come together on their own. Somebody has to stand in the center and sort of coordinate and pull. So who will be that employment czar? Is it the deputy governor? I don't know.
You know, sometimes I wonder whether this dysfunctionality is not by design, because you know, it is so obvious what needs to be done to make this thing right. But they're just, you know, government after government don't seem to be able to do what is necessary to make it right and to make it work. And so it's almost like they're saying, let's don't allow it to work, because if it works, it's going to
Yes.
get Caymanians, you know,
Yes.
moving forward.
Exactly.
Maybe I'm just being, you know, maybe that's just a conspiracy theory, but it just seems like it's so odd, you know, that I'm cynical about the whole thing, but it can work. And we need to have, like you said, either an employment czar or some kind of task force or some kind of commitment. But first of all, you need to have a policy, you have a roadmap of where you want to go, and we got to just get it done. I mean, it's simple. And all of the pieces can be put together, and we know what they are, but we have to have the commitment to do it. And I know, Dr. Roy, you are a Minister of Labor, and you know what needs to be done. And I know in my paper I wrote about your struggles in trying to do these things. And we know that there's a lot of special interests out there as well, but we can do it.
The way I see it, the current people that are involved cannot do it. It has to be headed up by an honest broker, someone who is a paid professional, paid to put this thing together. In other jurisdictions, that's how they do it. Whether you want to call it a czar, whether you want to call it a consultant, whether you want to call a person a consultant, but that's how it's done. Because right now, the parties that are involved don't trust one another. They all have territories which are sacred that they don't want anyone to trod upon. So it needs a professional to come in with an outside view that says, listen, if we want to get here, here's the roadmap. If we want to get to this destination, this is the road that needs to be taken. This is what has to be done. So now we come to the point where we're opening up. And the Tourism Association is saying they can't get the staff. The government authorities are saying, we're not giving you the staff because we want to be sure that you can hire Caymanians first. And so that's the argument. And it's always going and throwing between these positions. It's simple, you know, it's simple. It doesn't take rocket science. What we have to do is be honest and forthright. Find out how many Caymanians are needed. And here's something else that I think, gentlemen, we need a tracking system that we need what is called in social science, we need a longitudinal study. When Caymanians come out of the hospitality industry, we want to find out for what reason did they come out.
Mm-hmm.
Did they come out on their own? Did they find out that really wasn't what the vocation that they wanted, they weren't happy in it, or were forced out?
Yeah.
Go through things like constructive dismissal. What is the problem? Why they don't come in? Is it pay? Is it pay? Because that's what they stress. That's what Mr. Langevin said. This is not for everybody. It's long hours. It's working on holidays. Well, I'm telling you, if the pay is right, people won't bother with the long hours. They won't think about the inconvenience, but the pay has to be right.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to make some assessments.
Yeah. And these properties are charging, 3-star and 5-star rates, so they can just be able to pay the staff proper salaries.
Of course.
And not rely on gratuities for them to have something decent to carry home.
Well, I know the story about the gratuities, and I brought that up, and Mr. Langevin, with all due respect to him, he got very defensive. I say when I was there, when I was the Minister of Labor, I presided over many cases where there were thievery of the gratuities.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
The gratuities were being stolen.
Yeah, I know that too. Yes.
And he actually invited him to come and see the records, but it's something that we have to look into. And I would like to step one session back, one discussion, one conversation with the minister. And here's my question. Roy, you mentioned that we have the last chance to get this thing right. Now, the changes that we're talking about should be done, and all which that should be done. It's going to take guts. And there are other words I can use to describe what I mean by that. But the minister was very passionate in his presentation in this discussion. And we actually touched on over, and he really wanted to have Caymanians in the workforce. And he said the Caymanians are quite capable of doing it. Now, the government has to step up to the plate, and they will have to make these things happen. Do you think that this government have the ability and the strength to stand up to those that they should stand up to make these things happen?
Well, you asked me if I could just say, based on what the current government has done so far and said so far, that is the PAC government, I was looking for something tangible, impressive in their strategic policy statement and in their budget that would suggest that they're going to be serious about the whole area of development of our people and Caymanization and human capital development. I don't see it. So I hope that they're going to do something, but the indications are not there that I see.
Right.
I feel the same way. It's a difficult task. It's a difficult task. I've been there. I know what happens. The people who control the industry are the hoteliers and the restaurateurs, the tourism association. And so when they're ready, they will just call the minister and say, hey, listen, here's what we need. Until we get this, we can't operate.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody would be frustrated. I don't want to use the reference because it'll be misunderstood, but you can check any jurisdiction in the Caribbean where there is a large dependence on the hospitality industry and see if there was not a struggle. Jamaica, Barbados, the Bahamas, every one of them, long, hard struggle, sacrifice before it got near to where it should be. And we're years behind that. We're years behind it. The very nature of the society. Sometimes I wonder, see, the whole thing is predicated upon cheap labor. And we went through that argument. Ralph, you were there. I mean, because these people expect for their investments, they want to yield gigantic returns in short order.
Yeah.
But they're not prepared to pay Caymanians a living wage because they can pay people from other third world jurisdictions and get away with paying them far less. So where's the incentive to hire Caymanians? There's no incentive. There's no incentive. And then the government, for all due respect, because we had all of the players. First of all, there is no training because that's the excuse that's given. Oh, Caymanians aren't trained. They're not qualified. And Michael Miles said, when he was on, he said, look, I offered these people for services in what his organization, Inspire, whatever it is. But
Right.
nobody came forward, neither government nor the hospitality industry. So, until it comes down to where people are sincere, it won't get any better.
Yeah, and you're right, Dr. Roy, about what you said earlier about needing an honest broker. You need somebody who understands the employer, who understands the employees' concerns, and who understands the national concerns to put this thing together. And if it's not done soon, it's going to be too late. We're on borrowed time now, but we got to get it done soon, ASAP.
And I know it can be very discouraging, but I want to have hope, and I never give up. I want to have hope, and I think that there is a solution, and that's one of the reasons for this program. And I know that you all feel the same way. There are things that can be done. The negotiations. We're talking to the right people, and we're hearing from all sides, and we just think that there just needs to be some connection. And I think that there are a number of things that need to be done. There needs to be proper communication. We heard a lot of disappointment in the way decisions were made, and the communication wasn't the right way. And that caused disappointments on one side. So there are a number of things that need to be remedied before we get everybody eating out of the same soup cup. And so those kind of things we can speak to and encourage, since we have everyone's ears now, and try and get it. But we have to get it done now. We can't sit back and wait for another 2 years, because, like I said, we'll be back at the same status quo. But the tourism industry is changing. We have a lot of competition around the region. I just saw a release today from St. Kitts and Nevis. They had 5 cruise ships in today, and then they had Air Canada and BA flying in the next morning. They are pushing heavily. They were same size of country like we are, same amount of people, but they're pushing their tourism product. And it's happening over there. When people look at traveling to the region, they want to see where the activity is, where everyone's going. But if something doesn't happen soon, we may look at losing our tourist industry or getting a downsized version of industry, which may then have to be a rethink in the future.
But Ralph, I thought it was an announcement made that it was a cruise ship coming in sometime this month. What's happening with that?
Well, there was a press briefing last week where Minister Bryan did confirm that the cruise ship should be coming next week. And that was one of the questions that the media had for him. He did confirm. Last night we understood on another talk show that wasn't the case. We did our communication to GIS, and they found out from the Premier that it has been cancelled. They promised to send us a press release this morning. I just saw it coming in my inbox about while we were on the show. So I don't know the reasons for that, or if that has been changed, or if there's something. I haven't read it yet. But by the morning or late tonight, we'll know exactly what will happen. But from what the Premier said, the ship has been cancelled. But we didn't have any details as to why it was cancelled or what caused it to be cancelled. And so that is what we were hoping to get today. Unfortunately, just arrived about in the last 30 minutes. And so hopefully we'll understand clearly what they think. I was very disappointed the way it was done. I think that Minister Bryan should have come forth with the Premier to make the announcement, whichever way they want to do it. But it was just, and it was done in such a, in a shortened form. It created more questions than answers. And so I think that, that communication should have come, okay, the cabinet has considered it, and this is what we have to do. And it came forth from the minister and the Premier together, explaining exactly why. And they could have used their network. I mean, they have the radio Cayman, they have GIS, so they have the whole platform for doing it. Right. But it wasn't done that way, and it was disappointing.
Ralph, if you recall, one of the conversations we had with them, we raised the matter, we raised the issue of communication, and we told them the communications are poor. They actually agreed, and we suggested that, look, you're not using the media that you have at your disposal. You're not using Radio Cayman. You're not using any of these other things, and so you could have the best message in the world. If you don't have a medium to present the message, then your message is ineffective. So one of the things we highlighted to them, the panel highlighted to them, was their communications are poor, and they agreed with that. But I don't see any work being done on improving the communications.
Yeah, I must say though that I know we were harping on, the panel has been harping on the communication and the plans and whatnot for the management of the pandemic. And I know that I'm not sure how your discussion went with the Honorable Frans Manussen on the panel a few weeks ago, but I in traveling, I see an improvement in the communication situation with Cayman. It's still stressful, but there's communication, there's forms, there's systems, and in terms of when you come back in, you got to do the 2, 5, and 10-day lateral flow tests and stuff like that. The system appears to be working a bit better in terms of communication. Hopefully not getting overwhelmed, but there's a need globally for better communication, and whether there should be a regional or international kind of repository or a library the different protocols where you can go on and get updates as to what each country's requirements are for travel and whatnot. We need to do something like that, because let me give you a quick example. When we were flying back from Israel, we spent the whole day, half a day driving from Eilat to Tel Aviv, and we spent a couple hours in Tel Aviv. Three of us went out to dinner, and by the time we were getting ready to get, go to bed and get ready for the next morning travel to the States, we got an email saying the United States has changed the PCR tests from 48 hours or whatever it was to 24 hours. So we said, my God. So we just took our test the day before, and we had to then get back and get back and go in a cab and go across town in Tel Aviv to get another test again, simply because communication was not proper. So all I'm saying is that if you don't get proper communication, all the countries, all the regions around this thing, the next supply chain crisis is going to be with travel and tourism, because people are all over the place. So you need to have a centralized system. I'm not sure what Mr. Manderson said about that, if anything, but we need to have it.
I just, gentlemen, I just briefly read the release that came from the government, and it's the same thing that Mario was talking about. Apparently, because protocols were changed to 24 hours rather than 72 hours before, which meant that all the passengers on the cruise ship had to be tested the day before they arrived. And we understand that the cruise ship could not accommodate that request. And that's the reason for it, which makes perfect sense. So that's the first line I saw on the press release. So that makes sense to me, that because of the change in protocols from 72 hours to 24 hours, and everyone must be tested before they come to the island 24 hours, it was very impossible for the cruise ship to perform that test on all the passengers before they arrived in Cayman in 24 hours. And so that was not possible, and they couldn't accommodate that. So that's why, which we understand now.
Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, it's almost time to say goodnight. We've had a wonderful hour, but it's Christmas in about 2 days. And I see we're all wearing our pretty colors, red here, a little yellow here, Roy in his red blazer. And Christmas is a time of happiness and joy, family. And despite what challenges that we may have, it's always a time of laughing, smiling, having fun, and celebrating the life of Jesus. And so I want to give you some time, a few seconds before we sign off, to each give some Christmas greetings. Mr. Roy, I'll go with you first.
Well, I want to wish the Cayman Islands, and particularly the people who follow the panel, whether it be on Facebook or YouTube, I want to wish for them a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year when it comes. And I would just like to remind them, we have to give God thanks. We live in a beautiful jurisdiction, and Christmas is a time for charitableness and generosity. So give a gift to someone, an encouraging word, a smile, or a greeting. And remember to stay safe, abide by the protocols, and stay safe. Have some, if you're a Caymanian, make sure you have some good Caymanian style beef, a real Caymanian stew beef, not the full one that you get in the restaurants.
I want to echo exactly what Dr. Roy mentioned, all his sentiment he just spoke to. I just want to say, just to add to that, though, that I'm so pleased that myself and my wife Lavinia just got back from Israel, where we went to the birthplace of Christmas. We went to Bethlehem, the city of David in Judea. We went to Mary's well, where the angel Gabriel appeared to the Virgin Mary and said that she should have a child, a son. We went to the shepherd's field, where the shepherds saw the light in the sky, which was a star pointing to Bethlehem. We went into the Church of Nativity, where we saw the place, the manger, where Christ was born, and we touched the point where he was laying in the manger and the star of Bethlehem. And so we are enthused, and even more enthused about Christmas. And Christmas in Cayman is a time of wonderful fellowship. Remember the old Christmas trees that we used to have, this Cayman sand yards, and the Christmas Eve where everybody used to go to Georgetown and have a time of shopping and fun in downtown Georgetown in the 70s. And I want to encourage people to spend, as Dr. Roy said, and you yourself, Ralph, to spend quality time with each other. Resist the temptation about total materialism, watch our spending and watch our budgets, but let's spend time and give God thanks, because the real reason for the season is Christ coming into the world to save us. And I want to wish you, Ralph, a wonderful Christmas, you and your family and your team, and all of our viewers at the panel. And thank you very much again, gentlemen, for allowing me to be a part of this august group in the panel. And God bless you and good night.
One of my favorite songs, my Christmas song, was "Give Love on Christmas Day," and my message tonight is simple: give love every day. I think if you love someone like how you love yourself, and we should love ourselves the best, and if we give love, that will help us get through these journeys. And we can't be selfish. We have to understand that our brothers have to live and our sisters have to live. And so if we remember that we are one happy family, or one big family living on this earth, we don't know when we're going to leave. We don't know how long we're going to be here for. We have to survive and come together, and let's be one loving family for this Christmas. I want to thank all our listeners and all our supporters, even my engineering team, my two sons. Thank you for all. And gentlemen, I really appreciate having you on the panel. Look forward to many things in the future. I think we have a great job here. I think we have a role here to play. And I am committed, and so are you. I'm sure I can speak for you, that we're going to be here to bring love to the Cayman Islands. Thank you and good night.
Good night.
Good night.